So, Ray, do you think Cespedes is done?
Well, if he's not, we can totally do what Sandy Alderson wants to do.
What's that?
Oh, we rent a couple of horses and ride down and watch him work out.
Clip clop mofos. Hey, this is my friend, Ray.
What's up? This is my friend AD.
Ray is a tour manager who's traveled the world with everyone from the Beastie Boys to the Rolling Stones, engineered artists from Devo to Jane's Addiction to Selena Gomez, and looked after the careers of comics like Jim Gaffigan and Dane Cook.
And AD is a national radio personality, heard on stations across the country, who started off as a major label recording artist that gave me my first job as a tour manager.
I still can't believe that ended well.
Well, we still talk all the time now, and when we do, it's about music and cooking and baseball, especially our beloved New York Mets.
This is bands, barbecue, and baseball.
What do you think?
I think it was one take fucking miracle is what I think. Is Yoenis Cespedes finished as a Major League Baseball player?
Personally, I don't think he's done, but you know, he's going to work out for a bunch of teams. There's no DH in the NL, so it cuts the availability of DH opportunities in half for him. He's coming back from, you know, really a not a shady proposition, but you know, he really needs to prove himself. So okay, he's going to work out for a bunch of teams, and a bunch of teams will go check him out, but you know, it's limited to about half the available teams are going to really maybe take a flyer on him. You know what I mean?
So here's what's interesting to me about those workouts. We're like, hey, I'm going to show myself doing all the things that you got to do in baseball and invite all the teams down to check me out. It reminds me so much of what it used to be like for bands showcasing for record deals and agents and things like that. Like, oh, we're going to put on a mock show and you come down and you decide if you think we have the goods. And if you do, we get a contract. But like those shows, you ran a couple of them for my band back in the day. Everything is pristine. The sound man knows exactly what you need in your monitor. There is no, it's not like real life. There's no test of your true metal or ability. So I wonder during those things, like, sure, throw me the heat, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I have no idea what this next pitch is, but oh, look, I cranked it out of the park. Like, I always wonder about when you're allowed to set up your own pitching and your own running, like when you're in charge of your own display, it's a pretty advantageous situation.
Yeah, he's definitely going to invite. I believe he invited down one of his personal coaches. You know, throw me a couple of grapefruits. I'm going to, you know, I'm gonna hit them. He's gonna show his wares in the outfield. But personally, excuse me. Or that sucks.
You know, that is allergy season's coming. That means baseball is on its way. So that's good.
Damn right. I don't know of which teams are really going to say, take a serious flyer on a Cespedes and say, okay, show me what you got, because you're a 40-man roster with a 26-man team, and if you're an AL team that has a DH need, okay, maybe he can pop up a couple of, maybe he's got the goods, but I personally think they may already have someone in the system, or someone that's, you know, that is not going to cost them nearly as much, and that they're going to go for. But he may very well get someone to take a flyer on him. You know, the teams like that he's already been on. You know, he was on Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit. That's the rumor that there's a Cespedes Detroit Tigers reunion possibly in the works.
Which kind of is fucked up. Which is kind of screwed up, because you know they've got Cabrera, who's now the same age frame, who's coming to the tail end of his career, is going for career numbers in terms of long-term Hall of Fame type of numbers. And if they were going to give someone just at-bats or fill in something, I would say they'd be giving it to Cabrera, not just a guy who's coming around. You know, teams like the Yankees, I know the Yankees are taking a look at him. The Yankees have more DHs than three other teams, because they got 3 or 4 guys that can't do it in the field anymore, and they want to just DH.
I mean, it's interesting because when you think of Cespedes, you think of somebody that can hit home runs. But I was remembering that whole "you don't run on Yo" thing. Like, on the one hand, Cespedes basically does not work from the waist down. His ankles, his knees, like his legs, he is not a super ambulatory baseball player. He's a guy that works best as a designated hitter who then has a designated runner after that. But I always, when I'm thinking about Cespedes and who might take a flyer on him, I always forget the fact that he's in left field with a cannon where he'll throw out runners at home plate. And it's interesting because you really are getting half the deal with Cespedes, unless he's had plenty of rest over the last few years. Maybe his lower half does work now, especially after the way he sort of like shadily. Okay. Do you think it was shady the way he opted out of the season last year?
Well, it was offered to anybody who had, a suspicious feeling or didn't want to, and there wasn't going to be any ramifications of it. So I certainly don't want to be someone who says, you opted out and that was there's an easy way out for anybody. So I won't necessarily go there with any player that opted out, because they may very well have had some legitimate rational reasons for saying, I'm not feeling comfortable about this. Okay. For me, my concept or thought that I've had recently is, what if players that are now in the short-term future and long-term future, what if players really aren't going to play much more than, say, their 38th, year or so, because of the fact that teams are drafting earlier into the high school aged players. Players at that age are bypassing their college years. They're getting into, say, minor league systems of teams. And say a player can really debut in his 21-year-old age, the way that Soto has, the way that Acuna in Atlanta has. And yes, you'll have players like a Pujols or so that are going for lifetime-long records into the Hall of Fame. So the fact that they'll play into their 40th year or so is something. But my personal belief is maybe there's a bunch of players that are not necessarily going for lifetime achievement awards. They're going to get their last contract maybe when they're 35 or 36 years old, which is going to be no more than a 2 or 3 year deal. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see now players that are like done by 38 because they're supplanted by a young player with team control for the first 6-7 years of their career, because of the way that the service years are dealt with. And maybe we're going to see a bunch of more younger players without players playing into their 41-year-old year age, because there's no need for them to play that old, and that's just a thought of mine in terms of looking at the players there are today and what their level of play is in their 38-year-old year. What do you think?
Well, I think here's the thing. More and more, what you're really talking about is the value of a college education or playing college baseball or something of that nature. But I think more and more you see people going, is college really necessary? It's like if you're 2 PE credits away from graduating and you write code, you don't need those 2 PE credits and the money it costs to get them to go get your job writing code. Like, college has become so expensive. It's become such a thing. And, people are now in this digital era where it's almost like going to a trade school. And I think that because the cost of an education has become so astronomical, there's all sorts of people going, is it really necessary if you know what you want to do and you're already good at it? Like baseball players who skip college and go straight into the farm system. Now, if they injure themselves in the farm system and their baseball career is over at age 20, then, they're behind by a couple of years and they have to go back to college, and they're certainly not getting a college scholarship. But I mean, if you're, let the kids play. If you're good at something, you should do something.
That's almost what every football player who's ever been a really good football player in college, and he winds up getting injured. And I've worked with a ton of security guys who in their early 20s were football players, got injured, and now they're working security because they're large, huge guys that are put into that role. I look at almost service time. Service time in baseball is such a huge thing in terms of the dynamics of the economics of the game. And I look at service time compared to servitude, the way that servitude used to be back in the days. Players were literally indentured servants to the teams that they played for. And the new rules that made players have a six-year opportunity from the time that they debuted in the league of how many games they played in that season to now they're an actual major leaguer, to where they're now 3 years into that they have a time frame where they're now open for contract negotiations in terms of in terms of their contracts. The servitude of a player is a 6 or 7 year term of, we've got this player, we drafted him at whatever young age he was, and if we don't debut that player in the league, for say an extra couple of months, we can buy one more year of time frame of control over him, and it's a 6 or 7 year term, like frame, and a lot of teams that are economically not viable, they have to play that game. The Oakland A's and etc. have gotten very, very far in playing that game with players in terms of their control during their early years, and whether they're traded a year before they become a free agent, just to try to get more players from them. You know what I mean?
I think that a big part of it is, what position you play. Like, you look at somebody like you look at somebody like Noah Syndergaard, Thor, a guy who came up as an absolute flamethrower. His strength was he could throw a slider faster than most people could throw a fastball. Like, he was the throw it through a brick wall guy. I remember Mike Piazza, when they asked him, like, out of all the pitchers for the Mets now, who would you want to catch? And he was like, Thor. He was like, you see a bunch of cars, you want to drive the fastest one. That's just it. And with that situation, we saw it where he was like, I'm going to get bigger and stronger. And then he tore something in his back, and now he had to have Tommy John surgery. That window of being like that hard throwing guy is so short for a lot of people that if you are under team control, making league minimum during your best years, and then you hit free agency when you're all used up, what's there for you? And it's so dependent on what position you play and how you play it. Like, if you're a center fielder and you need speed, then, you're only going to be running at top speed for a certain amount of years, no matter how well intentioned you are. But if you're known as being like one of the best defensive center fielders there is, that's what your payday is going to be based on when you hit free agency. And if you've slowed down by that time, perfect example, Springer, he's 31 and obviously got paid like you wouldn't believe when he was able to go get paid like you wouldn't believe. But he's looking, optimistically, not knowing anything about like physical conditioning or anything. Like, here I am, a complete unfit guy that does nothing and lives a largely sedentary life, going, that professional athlete's got about 2 more years. So he's going to, I feel like the Blue Jays are going to get 2 great years out of him, and the rest of them is going to be like, okay, want to go give the guy in the clubhouse a pep talk? You sure seem to be quote unquote good for the clubhouse.
Right. Or Justin Turner for the Dodgers, who's been a successful player at third base for them for years. They just won a World Series now. He's 36 years old. He went to them and said, I want a 4-year deal. Yeah. And they did not give him a 4-year deal at all. They gave him a 2-year deal, as much as anybody else would give him just a 2-year deal till he's 38. And if he's still producing at 38 years old, maybe he'll get a 1-year deal after that, etc. But that is exactly my philosophy of why I think players might be coming to their peaks in their 38-year-old range rather than their 40, 41-year-old range anymore because of the onslaught of younger players with controllable contracts that are going to prove themselves and come in, and they'll set the market at a 6-year term between their 22 and 28-year-old age. And I think that might affect a lot of the veterans. It might affect a lot of their contracts that are coming through, because if you're not playing for a Hall of Fame type of record, etc., you're going to finish with your last contract and wave your cap and hope for some kind of coaching job or something else in terms of the job.
Also, I mean, I think if you are one of those guys that's going for a Hall of Fame contract, like let's say, Turner has had an amazing run playing for the Dodgers. I don't think he's a potential Hall of Famer. Maybe he is. I don't know, but I don't think so. But let's say he has an amazing 2 years and he's 38 years old. And then he's put in a situation where maybe I'm I'm X number of this away from making it to the Hall of Fame. The best move for a 38-year-old player like Turner that's looking to get as many sort of at-bats as possible is to go play for a team that's probably going to lose. You will be, hey, we got nothing going on, but you're going to get plenty of bats. You're going to get plenty of reps. You're going to, whatever stat you need to reach in this last 2 years of your career, we're going to give you a chance to reach it. So your best option is to go play for a losing team. And that's been brought up a couple of times where it's just whether it's at the beginning of careers or the end of careers, we want every team in all of Major League Baseball to be in a position where they are competing to win, not where we're holding people back for control, even though it could put them in a position to clinch a division or clinch a series or something of that nature. And it's funny because my attitude was these guys make millions of dollars a year doing this. Who cares if a team wants to protect their investment and hold on to them for a little bit? When people were debating whether or not Pete Alonso should have come up for the beginning of his rookie season, or if by holding on to him for a little bit longer before you call him up, you maintain control, I was like, he's a big investment. I don't see any harm in holding on to that for a little bit longer. And then they did, and they brought him up, and he had the most insane rookie year ever. And I was like, okay, right. I was wrong. That's better baseball. That's more exciting. As much as I love him and I never want to see him leave the Mets, and as much as, that makes him up for free agency that much sooner and takes the team out of control that much sooner. That's right. A better year of baseball for me as a fan and for him as a player. That's what, if someone's ready, they should play.
And that was a commitment that the Mets made that might have been something that other teams might not have done. And the situation right now exists with the Seattle Mariners, who have a former Met, as sad as I am to say, a former Met number one pick, Jared Kelenic, who is performing. Yes, he just got injured, so it's going to delay him a tiny little bit, but they would talk about delaying him only for the ability to control him for one more year. And it's caused a schism with him in terms of wait a second, I'm viable. I'm showing that I can play in this league, and you're holding me back and my development, etc., or the potential that I could have in this league, just for literally your ability to control me. And it's a controversial thing. I'm very glad the Mets did that with Pete Alonso, that they said, you know what, if you prove in spring training last year that you can do it, we'll bring you up. And they did. And 2 years ago, I apologize, because he had a sophomore year. Yeah. 2 years ago, they said, if you can prove that you can make the team, we are going to bring you up. And they did, and he did. And it was fantastic. And, a similar thing to seeing right now in spring training that our Mets are doing is they had 75 players invited to spring training, which is the maximum you could have. There are non-roster invitees. There are minor leaguers. There are kids that they invited to the camp that weren't expected to even get an invite to the camp, and they're giving them a shot. They're giving them a chance to perform and see what they can do at this level, and it's awesome. I today in particular they had a game that they played against the Marlins that finished in a tie, that they gave up some runs, they had some bad errors, etc., but they also had some good things. And I gotta admit, I was so happy watching my team looking like from top to bottom everybody was interested, that they were engaged, that they were happy to be there, that they were giving the kids a chance, and that spring training will go on in the next 2-3 weeks, and they'll start to cut down on the amount of people that are in it. They'll start to sending people back on along their way. But this has been a great time right now, just to enjoy our team doing what they're doing with all these players.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, not only that, but it creates goodwill and team spirit and all the above. Like, Jared, the moment he gets a chance to leave Seattle, he's going to bail like a man making a jailbreak. He's got such a bad set of feelings with that whole situation. I'm sure I'm sure more than anybody else, he probably wishes he wasn't traded by the Mets. Like right now, he's got to look back on it and see the new ownership and see the vibe there and be like, oh, here I am, hucking it out for like the shadiest of shady situations. And there went my past, like that, like it's got to be. Yeah. It's got to be a tough situation for him looking at what's going on with the Mets now, but also he must have zero sense of loyalty to Seattle. It's like, you haven't even put me in front of a crowd yet that desperately wants to see me. You're completely open and brazenly shady about controlling me, so I'm not able to play at my peak and I'm not able to perform. Like, you basically said, I'm a big leaguer, but we're not going to let you into the show yet because we want to save some cash. F you, F all this, F all y'all. The moment I see a sniff of something better, I am out of here, you mother effers. Like, I can't imagine he has an ounce of goodwill toward the Mariners right now.
I agree, and 6 years is a long time, so things can change and things can happen. My actual thought brings me back to the philosophy that I had as a tour manager, handling artists, etc., like that, and my defensive nature of, like, I need to protect you, or you need to be protected in any way possible. I literally had circumstances where I've had artists where, they're just under normal circumstances of life and wanting to, like, play sports or do this or do that, and I meet me literally having to tell a young artist, a young person, saying, listen, you got responsibilities, you got contracts that are signed, you got things that are signed, that people are waiting on you, and I'm not going to allow you, or I'm going to be an influence to you of, like, I'm going to wrap you up in bubble wrap and not let you do that.
Hold on, actually, but before we get into this, let's go. We started this conversation talking about Cespedes, and I think this dovetails perfectly into what you're talking about, because let's bear in mind the Cespedes saga for a second, shall we? Okay. He arrives in Queens, and I believe we actually use the expression Cespedes does Cespedes things. He's cranking out home runs left, right, and center. He puts us in a position to go all the way, as Jerry Seinfeld said, a Cespedes for the rest of us. It was great. It was the greatest thing ever. And then what happened? This is what always amazed me about Cespedes' career, because I think it was right after he'd re-upped with the Mets, where the Wilpons, against all odds, had stumped up whatever it was, $135 million for 5 years, or
I think 125 for 5 years.
Yeah, like they'd actually gone through the Wilpon couch cushions, found some cash, and got themselves a real baseball player, and we were all excited. And in that off season, there was some article I read somewhere about Cespedes and what gave him the strength of character that he had. And the whole article focused on how he wasn't afraid of putting in the hard work on his ranch in Florida. He's up trees. He's pruning branches with a big circular saw. He is, slamming in fence posts. He is. And I was like, what is he doing? Like, you just spent $125 million on this guy, and he's at the top of a tree with a sharp bladey thing. Absolutely not. Like, sacrifice the team control where you can't go anywhere, but have it put in the contract. No. And what was he was attacked by a wild boar? Like, that's what happened?
Yes, he was on his ranch and a wild boar like literally rushed him. He stepped into a hole, a root hole in the ground, and fractured his ankle. And that the responsibility of that happening is no different than there was a pitcher for the Yankees, Joba Chamberlain, years ago, who signed a contract with the Yankees, and it was it had very restrictive clauses in it of like, you can't do this, you can't ride motorbikes, you can't you can't do this. And he took his kid to a bouncy park,
trampoline park,
the quad maker, and he took his kid to a trampoline park, and he fractured his ankle on trampoline to the point where when they called the ambulance to come get him, they were afraid that he was losing so much blood that he wasn't going to live, let alone be put back together to play a major league sport. And it's completely his fault. I mean, no, you're not allowed to go on a jumpy game with your kid after you sign.
No bounce house.
Yeah, no bounce house. No dirt bikes. No boars.
Exactly, dirt bikes. The same guy who destroyed all our hopes and dreams in 2016 in that wild card game, Mad Bum. Like, he's out for the season because he was on a motorcycle on a dirt bike. I remember being in an airport somewhere, and not long after that happened, and he was out, and Cespedes was out, and I'm there in my I'm Yankees. What the hell? Hold on a second. I just slapped myself on the wrist. I'm there in my Mets hat, and I see a Giants fan in his Giants hat. I'm like, sorry about Mad Bum. He's like, sorry about Cespedes. I was like, what you gonna do? Sucks. Like, what happened to you, Baumgartner? Well, I was on a motorbike. No, that sentence ends right there. No motorbikes. Like, if you're on a baseball team, Cespedes almost gets gored by a boar. What the heck? Like, just like the professional baseball player and gored by a boar should not be used in the same sentence. No gored by a boar. No threshing. No pruning. No horse riding. No climbing of trees. Nor activities involving blades, wildlife, or heights of any kind. No dirt bike riding. No trampoline parking. Nothing that could prevent you from doing your $25 million a year job. Maybe you go to a wedding, weddings, including your own, allow you the opportunity for one electric slide or Cupid shuffle a year as a form of permitted celebration. Otherwise, if it's not on a baseball diamond or in a practice facility, you're bubble wrapped, you're hermetically sealed, and you are holding still. Like, how dare you take $25 million and prune a freaking tree?
That's my point about my experience being a tour manager, handling music artists, etc., in a completely different vein, but a parallel vein to this. I was tour managing the band Sublime from Rome from literally the time they started, and Rome, who's a young guy who we were rehearsing at a rehearsal spot in Southern California.
For those that don't know, I mean, everybody obviously knows Sublime, but Sublime with Rome was the next incarnation of Sublime some 20 plus years later, with this unbelievably talented kid, probably about 25 years younger than the other guys in the band, who was the perfect substitute for the late great Bradley Nowell, and a great way to go out and pay tribute to that catalog. But it was a big deal when that whole thing was assembled. Like, the alternative rock world stopped and paid homage to the fact that this band responsible for all these songs that have been a huge part of the soundtrack to our life are back together, and you get into rehearsals with them, and what happens?
Well, we're in rehearsals, and literally on a break, they're outside, and there happens to be a half-court basketball court set up at rehearsals, and they're tossing the ball around, and I felt I felt obliged as the responsible one to go to him and say, dude, I can't allow you to do this. It was a basketball court with one basketball court set up, and the base of the basketball court was like a very precarious set of rocks and stuff like that. And I was like, no, like I'm gonna wrap you up in bubble wrap and put you in the truck and ship you from truck to truck, ship you from show to show, because as responsible as you might feel, I'm the responsible one. I've got a mortgage. We got contracts signed for all these shows. If this happens, if something bad happens, and I hate to say it, my experience in the past is what made me think of that. I was with the Beastie Boys back in the day. And in the year 1999, 2000, starting to set up a tour where we were about to tour with Rage Against the Machine, Mike D in rehearsals the night before we were getting ready to leave. We were in rehearsals in New York, and he rode his bicycle to rehearsals, and he was leaving rehearsals and said, I'm going to ride my bike home. And I remember literally saying to him, hey, Mike, you want me to call you a cab? Yeah. You want to just take a taxi? And he said, no, man, it's cool. We live in Manhattan. This is New York. He hit, while riding home from rehearsal, he hit a bottle in the street, went head over heels over the handlebars of the bike, broke his collarbone, and not only was the tour entire canceled, Rage Against the Machine broke up. Right. That was the first time they broke up. Every vendor of the tour were forced to basically sue them for potential, lost income, etc., because of the situation. And I recall it was years of Beasties like literally like having to pay back a lot of lost money because of one simple thing. And it sounds so controlling. It sounds so not even big, big daddy kind of, or big mother. It sounds so controlling of like, don't do this, don't do that. But the reality of the fact is that there's a level of responsibility. There's a level of just things coming back to you that'll come back to you. And it's parallel in the music industry compared to being in a situation on a professional team.
I mean, the one advantage that you have is, like Cespedes gets out for the season, you can find another player. With Mike D, you can't find another Mike D. Not only is he the vocalist in that band, but, when BCs play instruments, he was a drummer. So broken collarbone there's nothing you can do about that. That's, but yeah, any industry where you are one person and you are being paid millions upon millions of dollars to do this, it means not only are you getting paid millions of dollars, it means that you are generating millions of dollars of income for other people that have staked the next however many months or years of their life on working for you in this situation. It's like you said with the Sublime with Rome thing. Hey, we're about to launch this massive revival of Sublime's career, and I have a mortgage, and I've signed on to. How long did you with that initial run of dates you agreed to do with Sublime with Rome? How long was that?
Oh, we toured for the first 2 years like that with the hopes that nothing would happen. And Eric Wilson, the original bass player from Sublime, and still a member of Sublime, in the years since then, he's had two different circumstances where on his ranch that he lives on, he's crashed.
Don't get a ranch. It's like between Cespedes and the guy from Sublime, it seems like ranches are nothing but disasters waiting to happen. I'm just going to stand precariously close to this threshing machine. What could go wrong?
Right. And I totally get it. You gotta, people have to live their lives and they have to experience what they have to experience. But like I said, Eric Wilson from Sublime has had two very unfortunate circumstances where he flipped and crashed his an ATV and broke ribs and etc.
Wait, and he flipped an ATV twice. Like the first time didn't teach him the valuable lesson of, hey, that thing that you were doing on an ATV before that caused it to flip and cost millions of dollars and put Ray out of pocket because he had to tour manage something that couldn't be tour managed anymore.
No,
let me try that again.
The only fortunate aspect of that is that the bass player from Sublime can literally move like a glacier in terms of, I'm going to put you here on stage and I need you to go do 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 do, and he can accomplish his goal. He's not David Lee Roth pulling splits in the midair, and but it's an effed up situation. It's very tough.
Yeah, you know what he's like? He's like somebody. He's a knuckleballer. Like he doesn't need to throw at 110 miles an hour to have a career. He could sit on 56 as long as he can confuse someone and do it out of shape into his 50s.
God, if he could get it up to 56, it'd be amazing. Because literally, if you're the bass player in a reggae band such as Sublime, your entire job is to sit on the root. Like you could literally, I could pull up a one of those folding chairs, or not even folding chair. I could pull up a one of those old man Archie Bunker type of chairs and like just here lean back, and I just need you to go do 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 do, and like that's all you got to do. They're like, hey, our lighting guy's got the easiest job in the world. He doesn't have to chase you all over the stage. like he's like. Do. Just do that. Like,
there are,
and we're all gonna leave happy.
There are certain bands that have mastered that art. There are certain bands that have mastered that art where I remember Snoop Dogg once gave a Snoop Dogg dance lesson for something where he was like, the less you move, the more of a pimp you look like. The less you're trying, and he basically just sort of like put his arms up a little bit, moved imperceptibly small amounts, and just looked awesome doing it. There's some bands that can get away with that. I like bands that put on a show. I like bands that are setting themselves on fire and doing backflips. But there's something special about bands like Sublime, like Dirty Heads, who are on that tour, where really they just kind of like stand there, sing and play, and for some reason it's mesmerizing. It's like whispering so people lean in to hear you, as opposed to shouting where people lean back. It's like it's two different art forms to have mastered.
I toured for years with Brandon, with Panic at the Disco, and Brandon, the lead singer, who's an amazing performer. That kid is Freddie Mercury reinvented, like in terms of our new phase. And I toured with them from the first Panic at the Disco tour that they ever did, where they literally told every promoter, we're an arena act and we're going to play arenas. And every promoter said, but have you ever played an arena? And they said, no, we're just telling you that we are. And we were, and we did. Like Panic at the Disco, Brandon, the lead singer, that kid comes to perform. He sets it on fire. He's one of the best performers I've ever seen. And, in a circumstance where like when Dave Grohl fell off the stage and broke his leg, Dave Grohl, being Dave Grohl, could literally say, I want to create a Game of Thrones type of throne made of guitars, and I will sit here and play. And more people wanted to come see him play doing that than necessarily, staying there and play. So there's aspects, there's different aspects of it. I'd have to admit.
You make such interesting points about all of this. It's so funny because I love that story about Dave Grohl falling off the stage, breaking his leg, and heroically finishing the show. He tells that story of like, the guy was like, I have to hold your leg together, otherwise it's going to fall apart. He's like, cool, you're holding it together. And doing something like having it popped back into its socket or something like that. And he said his wife was there. He's like, give me your leather jacket. I'm going to bite down on it while they do this. And and doing that and, getting seen to, and then getting back. But that's an incredible story of rock and roll heroism. But you just know on the other side of Dave, as his wife's handing him the leather jacket to bite down on so he can go out and rock, the tour accountant is standing on his other side going, this is how much we stand to lose if you can't figure out a way to do this, because you're literally the biggest band in the world. This is how many people will be. This is how open to lawsuits we will be if you can't figure out a way for the show to go on. So it's like,
I did a tour with Devo, and we were playing in New York, where I'm from. And so it was my triumphant show with Devo back in New York. I invited everybody I knew in New York who knew I was a Devo fan since I was in 6th grade. So it was a triumphant return.
Hold on, little bit of context. I've known Ray for, I don't know how many years, but one of the first things I found out about Ray was that he was a huge Devo fan. I was like, that's cool. He was like, not only that, check this out. Zip, drop. This is a Devo barcode tattooed on my ass. So this is a guy, you might might have a level of fandom towards some band. You might even have a band-related tattoo somewhere on your body. But do you have the barcode of your favorite band's favorite album tattooed on your butt? No, you don't. So Devo, Ray, big deal. Continue. Just had to get the context.
They are one of the reasons of who I am is because of them, and my wife was their secretary, etc. Like my whole life has been around them. But we played the show in New York, and it was literally my triumphant New York Devo show of my own. And in the last song before the encore, Josh Freese like literally hit his finger on the snare drum and broke his finger, fractured his finger, and it was bleeding and everything like that. And we came off stage, and the guys all looked at each other, and they were like, well, what are we going to do? And I literally stepped up to the plate, and I said, I'll do it. I'll play drums. And they looked at me and said, what do you mean? I was like, I play everything. I can do this. And Josh, to his credit and to my demise, literally said, no, wait. I want to play the encore with one hand. And I was like, no, this is my chance. And so
I got out in front of your hometown crowd, been the hero, played drums with Devo on the very last show of their tour in your hometown in front of every kid that you grew up with, talking about Devo with, and having their posters on the wall. Like, oh, and that son of a bitch decided to be the hero and play it with one hand.
I spent the entire encore sitting on the drum riser with a cup of ice with his left pointer finger in a cup of bloody ice, me holding it while he played the entire encore with one hand, which was incredible. And then 3 weeks later, we were in rehearsals in LA and just setting up, and I got behind the drums like to sound check the drums while we're doing it. And they walked in, they were like, oh, you really can play. You could have done it. I was like, oh my God, my shot, you know. And I totally brushed Josh's balls about that. Still to this day, I was just like, your triumph of playing with one hand nowhere matches the triumph that would have been me playing. I would have literally finished the last song, probably slit my throat from ear to ear, pulled my tongue out through the whole, New York necktie stuff, and been like, I'm done. And it didn't happen.
Well, in retrospect, we're here to talk about it. So that's almost as good? Question mark.
Right. It happened. So back to Cespedes.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
I understand he wants to, okay, he's 36 years old. He says he wants to play 4 more years. Maybe he's going to get a flyer with somebody. They're only going to give him a small stipend of a money, and the rest of it will be levels of prove you can get to this level. It'll be against everything he can do. And you know what? Maybe he can do it. And as a Met fan, I wish he would have done it for us. I wish the whole thing would have worked out to the point where I'd be so pro Cespedes of his years with the Mets. But it turned out to be a farcical, what could have been kind of thing.
It was, like if that was the end of the Will Ponian era and the beginning of the Cohenian era, like that expression, that's so Mets, applies perfectly to all of everything that happened with Cespedes. So maybe that was going out on the old, out with the old and in with the new, but out with a bang. Like that was, like a comedy of errors. And, oh, by the way, when I said that it was a little shady the way Cespedes opted out of the season, I did not want to imply in any way, shape, or form that it's shady for a player to opt out, especially when they were headed down to Florida, where at the time COVID was rampant. Nobody really knew what was going on. Nobody knew it was safe or not. But the controversy came from the fact that he did not tell the team he was opting out. He just straight up didn't show up at the ballpark, and his agent called later saying, yeah, he's not, this is last year on his contract and he's opting out. And the scuttlebutt was because because Cespedes' career with the Mets had been what it had been, they kind of had a reworked contract, which was incentivized, meaning you're going to get a fraction of what we were going to pay you unless you hit a bunch of home runs, and then you're gonna hit your paydays. And he was apparently his in addition to his constant rides on a horse around dangerous wild animals, the other thing that was chapping his ass was the fact that he wasn't getting the at bats to go earn his incentive. So that was that. When I said it sounded a little shady the way he opted out. It seemed like he wasn't happy with his situation, and the way he bailed was kind of yes. Come on, man.
You're absolutely right. And in reality, right now, if say the universal DH was going on this year, so that all teams had a viable option for DH, and his options as far as teams that he could sign with, to be honest, the one of the greatest things that could ever happened, he could sign with, say, like the Miami Marlins, because he's Cuban, and there's a huge Cuban contingency in Southern Florida, and his comeback would have been so motivating and so inspirational to everything if it could happen. And the Marlins as a team, they made the playoffs last year. They're like, who knows what could happen? The NL East is up for grabs, to be honest with you, in terms of the 5 teams that are in it. So, like, there's so many storylines that could have been so fantastically done. Had baseball gotten its head out of its butt 2 months earlier and said, this is what the rules will be, instead of leaving everyone to guess until like the last week before spring training as to what the actual rules of the season were going to be. So, I don't blame him. Okay, go for yours, go for what you can. Same as a pitcher. Right now, Bartolo Colon is 42 or 43 years old, and I believe he's pitching for a Mexican team, hoping and praying that he might get some Major League Baseball team to just take an interest in him enough to let him perform in the major leagues this year during the season, and he could pick up maybe another win or two. And I believe he's going for an all-time record in terms of the most amount of wins for a Puerto Rican-born player, Dominican-born player. I forget his lineage, but that's a long-term playing bona fides to go for that. Not everybody will ever get a chance to do, and he's got the opportunity to do it. And if he could get up there and throw 46 miles an hour and still strike somebody out and get a win or two here, I'd love to see Bartolo Colon get the opportunity to do that.
It's interesting because it's so funny, because a player like Cespedes, a player like Bartolo Colon, a pitcher like Bartolo Colon, who does not rely. I mean, it's funny because I think Thor said it, I think DeGrom said it too at one point, that Bartolo Colon was their Yoda, meaning this was a guy who started out as a hard thrower and managed to, although a little hefty to carry around on your back. When 900 years you become, should you look so young? Right. Oh my God, that's amazing. But well, of course, there's all this scuttlebutt that a lot of South American players are not the same age that their quote unquote birth certificate says. So who even knows? But
he's probably older.
But I mean, he sort of transformed from this guy that was a hard thrower to a guy that, I mean, also he was a hard thrower that got popped for steroid use. And I bet he went, if I can't juice, I got to figure out how to pitch in a different way. And he did that very successfully. And he did it out of shape, and he did it. It reminds me, so being in radio, and you must have had similar experiences with bands that get back together. Like there's a whole bunch of bands from a different era that got back together. And it's so funny because I remember in the same year, my station in Houston had 2 enormous festivals. And during those 2 enormous festivals, somewhere on the bill were the reunited Limp Bizkit. And you may laugh, but those guys have sold an awful lot of records. So there's a bunch of people looking to go relive their misspent youth with Limp Bizkit. And like they sold tickets like you would not believe. It was a crazy thing to watch. But in the same kind of time frame, we had a show where Limp Bizkit was part of the bill and lots of people were buying those tickets, and a show where Bush was part of the bill, and a lot of people were buying those tickets. And I was like, it's got to be so much easier for Fred Durst. They're like fucking Gavin Rossdale is doing push-ups and sit-ups and watching what he eats and being healthy, because he's got to be like a part of the package is a good-looking guy that, you know, is in shape and can run around the stage half naked with his like you got to be that. You want to be Gavin Rossdale. You want to be the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's so funny. Chili Peppers, one of the most artistically heightened bands on the face of the planet. Yet if they can't go out there on stage pushing 60 with their shirts off, there's got to be less people showing up at the shows. And I was like, boy, Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit and that Aaron Lewis guy from Stained really had it figured out. I was fat and bald in the 90s. I'm fat and bald now. What up? Meanwhile, there's Gavin Rossdale doing precedence. Yeah, there's Gavin Rossdale doing wind sprints and push-ups, praying to get back in the game. And those guys are like, no problem. Hand me a cheese dog. I'm ready to go on stage.
It's very true. You are the bar that you set.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good one. Well, I it's a very good comparison between ball players and musicians, in my opinion. So, for instance, there's a crap load of bands never got beyond the van trailer level.
Oh, hey, what up?
Band. Yeah, I'm not calling anybody, but that is equivalent to being in the minor leagues and hoping to someday get a cup of coffee in the majors. In terms of the dedication, and in terms of riding in the back of the bus or riding in the back of the van from some small venue to another small venue to play for a small amount of people with the hopes that it may happen. And I think it was a little bit more prevalent back in the days, in the 80s and 90s, etc., than it necessarily is now, only because the economics of how things work. It's not as easy to be an independent business or a small business with your sustainability going from club to club and selling a handful of T-shirts to make it. That was way more of a business model back in the day than I necessarily think it is now. But I don't consider it very much different to being in the minor leagues and having that same dedication as to I'm hoping to make it. I'm hoping to make it, and I'm going to play in front of anybody that I can, and I'm going to perform the best I can, and this is what it is.
Ultimately, every musician is just R.A. Dickey playing in some South American league, sleeping in his car and sending his per diem home to his wife in the hopes of better things.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm trying to figure out which one gets laid more than the other one in terms of the the rugrat kind of chicks that hang out in each of those scenarios, because that again back in the day was a whole other scenario of like why people toured or why people played in the minor leagues. Everything's become so much more of a business. Everything's become so much more of a corporate business. But bringing that full circle to what I was saying about the young youth, if you're a kid that was scouted in high school and got picked up on a contract by a major league team, and you're bypassing your college years to go into the majors to try to play, and you're showing your wares at 19, 20 years old. I think the major leagues, combined with the international players that they're scouting, because the international players are not held to the same level in terms of a U.S. born or Canadian born player who's going through the systems. An international player, you could be 18 years old and the next Barry Bonds, and they're going to pay you what they have to as far as the international money is, et cetera, to get you onto a contract. And if you are 19 years old and can perform, boom, they're going to drop you in, and you're going to perform or you're not.
If you're some kid in Mexico that happens to be able to throw a screwball, great things can happen for you on the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Exactly. And I personally think that's almost a business model that major leagues is actually going to go closer to, because teams that have financial problems, et cetera, like that, if they can control players the first 6 years of their time while still drafting more players, they might be more inclined to say, I'm going to get the best out of these first 6 years that I can. If that player is a great player, fantastic. He's now going to become the A squad, the A level teams, the Yankees, the Mets, the Cubs, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, like these teams that are actually paying big money for these players. But there's almost a secondary league going on in terms of teams like Colorado and Pittsburgh and other teams that are barely paying their players, and they're reliant upon the young players, get what you can out of them, and then trade them for more draft picks before they can be signed to a big contract. And it's a horrible shame of the fact that there's almost two different leagues in the major leagues. I personally can't stand it.
Yeah, it's almost like if you go play for Pittsburgh, you're playing in quadruple A.
Yeah, you're right. It's the 13th grade in terms of like high school to college. Me personally, like the Pittsburgh Pirates are a team that their yearly payroll for players, I believe, is sitting somewhere around $30 or $40 million, while Trevor Bauer just got a $42 million 1 year deal from the Dodgers, who have a $250 million annual AAV payroll for their team. I personally, I'm a big endorser. Like, I wish that a team like the Pirates would get taken over by Major League Baseball in some kind of conservatorship for the time being, until a real owner could be found that will actually put money into it, because it's not fair to the Pits, it's not fair to their fans, it's not fair to the teams, it's not fair to the rest of the league. And I'm an even bigger advocate of, I would want someone, say like Oprah Winfrey, to buy the Pittsburgh Pirates and position an entire front office of female front office people to completely throw everything to the wind with Major League Baseball in terms of how it's dealt with minorities, how it's dealt with females, etc., which is a whole nother controversy that's going on in baseball. But
you never know. I mean, I don't know if Oprah has any interest in owning a baseball team, but J-Lo, admittedly the J-Lo package comes with A-Rod, but like J-Lo's got a whole bunch of erectile dysfunction money burning a hole in her pocket that she wants to go spend on a baseball team somewhere. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
They invested in some. For those that don't know, J-Lo and A-Rod, when they were hoping to buy the Mets, invested in some sort of erectile dysfunction medication in the hopes that the dividends it paid would put them in a stronger financial position to buy the New York Mets. So, which was wow. So they've still got all that money. They've got all the ED Med money. Why don't you go buy the Pirates?
I personally have no experience with any kind of erectile dysfunction creams or medications whatsoever, so I'm gonna have to take your word for it in terms of these type of things. But
it led to a very interesting new pickup line. Are you trying to buy the New York Mets, or are you just happy to see me?
The answer is both. The sad answer is both.
So, Ray, what are you cooking this weekend? What's for dinner?
One of my favorite things to make from scratch is definitely pizza. So I've got a couple of different doughs that I've already been preparing and letting them ferment and rise and do what they do, so I can do a couple of pizzas this weekend for myself and for the kids and for friends. So I'm gonna do a couple of pizzas.
Well, you're hardcore with it because you're talking about dough fermenting and rising. Also, I know that you lived in Rome and you picked up a whole bunch of Italian cooking skills there. Does this mean if you're making homemade pizza, did you have like a full-blown pizza oven? One of those, like, I don't know. Do you have a pizza oven?
I totally want to have a pizza oven where I live in Southern California in Palm Springs. One, because of the issues that they have here with fire, etc., and there are definite issues in the environment of not wanting people to have exterior fires, etc., like that. I've kind of I mean I have a smoker. I've got a legitimate fantastic smoker and barbecue and stuff like that. But I kind of haven't gone that route yet as much as I want to. So I've been relying upon my home oven, which is a technique that you can make really good homemade pizza in a homemade oven in a regular home oven that you have in your house. It's not as perfect. It's not as fantastic as a pizza oven can be.
So you are telling me that you don't need what is a pizza? Because whenever I tried to make pizza at home, it doesn't wind up tasting like pizza that I've had at a pizzeria. Sure. So I just assume that's because don't pizza ovens get ludicrously hot? How hot do they get?
A pizza oven will get between 800 and 900 degrees Fahrenheit, which is tantamount to a proper pizzeria.
Wait, say that again?
A pizzeria.
When you went to Rome, when you lived in Rome, like for people that don't know, Ray lived in Rome, Italy for a while you were the production manager for one of the biggest metal bands on the face of the planet, Dream Theater. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Yeah, while I was PM for Dream Theater, and at the same time, just coincidentally, it was 2004 when George Bush had won re-election, and a whole bunch of people had been like, "I'm leaving the country. This is horrible."
Oh, so you were actually one of the people that actually did it.
I literally said to myself, I've got a gorgeous Italian girlfriend who lives in Rome, and this country's getting stupider as it is. I'd rather much spend my time over in Italy. And we were, to be honest, we were spending a lot of times touring Europe at that time with Dream Theater, as they do. So it was a no-brainer. I was just
like, buongiorno, mofos.
Yeah. Arrivederci. So yeah, I moved to Rome for years, just literally under that guise, because like I said, I had a beautiful Italian girlfriend with an apartment in Rome, and we lived there, and I still was working, so it didn't matter where I lived. It's like as a tour production manager, one of the things, especially in your younger years, it really doesn't matter where you live because you're traveling to and fro all the time. In my older years now that I'm married to a beautiful woman, I have a home and my kids, etc., like that. It's you're well more planted in one single place. So yeah, I lived in Rome for years, and it really made me it forced me to up my game in terms of my Italian cooking and primarily my pizza cooking, which I became a real student of. So yes, you were a student of the pizza. Yes, I literally became a student of the pizza in terms of how, what, where, and etc. From everything from the raw ingredients to technique, etc. And my main thing that I preach to a lot of people is you can make a very realistic, like fantastic homemade pizza in an oven at home that only gets to about 550 degrees, but a pizza oven that gets to 800, 900 degrees Fahrenheit is so much more reasonable and realistic, and the cooking time is so much shorter. The blast of heat makes a big difference in terms of your dough and your toppings and how things are cooked. But yes, you can make a reasonably and realistically really good home pizza in a standard oven, which is what I've been doing lately, because one of the techniques, or one of the things you do is you need a pizza stone. You need a piece of stone.
A piece of stone.
Yes, if you don't, right. Yeah.
So for those that didn't live in Rome and don't know the details of reproducing the effects of being approximately 25 feet from the sun in a pizza oven, what is a pizza stone? Pizza
stone is a ceramic or stone a piece that you set in your oven that really it brings in the heat. You're cooking on a surface that's very similar to, say, a pizza oven that is either made of brick or made of some kind of stone, etc. So a pizza stone, very similar. It it's a conducer of heat, so that your temperature in your stove is, yes, 550 degrees, but that stone is built up to and maintaining that temperature, and it's translating into your cook. So it's a big help.
The pizza stone you put in your oven, it's a conductor of heat that kind of sort of mimics an actual pizza oven, like you might find in a, let me try this like you do it, Pizzeria.
Well, actually, it's a pizzeria. No, it's true. It's totally true, because the stone, the brick, the element of the pizza and that conduction of heat makes a big difference. So the mimicry of it in your regular oven at 550 degrees, it makes a big difference. So yeah, if you're gonna make pizza at home, I would totally recommend getting yourself a pizza stone, which is maybe $30-$40. And
really? That's it?
Oh yeah. Oh no, it's not crazy. It's nothing insane. And the techniques of using it, there are literal techniques of using it. You want to be careful. You need to preheat it in certain ways. There are certain elements to using it.
So, all right, this begs an interesting question. You get the pizza stone, and I'm assuming that you gotta heat it up in the so you set your however high your conventional, not a pizzeria oven goes, like 550, 600 degrees. Is that where most home ovens max out?
Most home ovens will max out at 500 to 550 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes.
So I'm assuming if you need the pizza stone to conduct the heat, you do not put the pizza stone in at the same time as a pizza. Like, do you have to leave it in there for it to heat up for a while?
Yeah, you preheat. So the way you preheat your oven, so you would set your oven to, say, 550 degrees on bake. Broil is another concept, which is another thought process of using your home oven to make pizza, because a broiler, the heat is coming from the top instead of from the bottom, which is a big difference. But you would preset your oven to a 550 degrees, let it literally hit that 550 degrees. But with that stone in your oven, you leave that stone heating in that 550 degrees for literally about an hour, because it takes that long for it to not only hit that temperature, but to maintain and really breathe through that temperature, so that when you do put your pizza on it, it's literally at the hottest it can be.
So it's got, like, this is going to give you that sort of delicious crispy bottom of the pizza and crispy edges in the way that you look forward to with something like that. But okay, so you've got the pizza stone in the oven for an hour, you get it up to scorchingly hot, 550 or so degrees, and then you've got this sort of pliable doughy thing that you want. How do you put the pizza on top of the stone at 550 degrees and not die?
It's very similar to having sex with a porcupine. Very carefully. and I say that in that, like for instance, one technique that I use that I recommend, and I'm talking technique here. I set my pizza that I've constructed with all my toppings, etc., like that. I set it on a piece of parchment paper, meaning cooking paper, parchment paper, and that paper, you can slide your pizza peel, your server. That's that big wide piece of wood or metal that you serve a pizza on.
Oh, that's like that giant spatula that you see them using to get. Okay, got it.
Yeah, that's referred to as a peel.
A pizza peel,
right?
A pizza peel. A pizza peel. Is that what they? Is that what they call it at the pizzeria?
At the generally in a pizzeria, that's what they will use to install or to impart the pizza into the oven. But what I was saying is, I generally will place my pizza on a piece of parchment paper and like literally place it onto the stone on the parchment paper and leave it literally on the parchment paper for 2 minutes into a roughly 10-minute long cook, because one, the parchment paper is an aid to you getting it cleanly onto the stone, meaning that if, say, your pizza is 12 to 14 inches big in diameter and it's slightly larger than your peel, etc., like that, the parchment paper helps you place it on the stone. Yet it will not burn. It will not ignite like it's the 4th of July.
Yeah, parchment paper is like magical stuff. I don't understand it, but I used it for the first time a little while ago. I was like, wait, you can put paper in the oven. It's not going to burn the house down. I don't know why. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. What's this stuff made of?
If you're going to bake cookies, I prefer baking cookies on parchment paper than say on a greased baking tray, etc. Because
that's exactly what I did. This is super rock and roll, but I made shortbread the other day for the first time. Like I made shortbread cookies with jam in the middle, thumbprint cookies. You ever made those?
Living on the edge.
yeah, right. Have you ever made thumbprint cookies before? Where it's basically shortbread cookies, and you put a little bit of jam you put a thumbprint in the middle and fill it with jam, and then bake it.
I happen to be a hardcore guitar player from back in the 80s. So if I said yes that I make cookies that way, would it imply that I'm not a hardcore guitar player from the 80s New York scene? Yes, I do make those. So you just ruined my New York hardcore bona fides.
Well, and this is this much more punk rock. I find that when you run out of jam, I was making raspberry and strawberry jam thumbprint cookies the other day. So it's shortbread cookies with a thumbprint in the middle that you fill with raspberry, strawberry jam. I found that when you run out of that and you have a little bit of lemon curd left over from something that you made before, it is delicioso.
That is the way Sid Vicious used to do it, I believe. In fact, I've read Sid Vicious's cooking book, My Way, and I believe I remember him saying that he furtherly implants his thumb and fills the gaping hole of his thumbprint with butter or some other kind of. Yeah.
Well, I think that therein lies the answer to his attraction to Nancy Spungen. She had some leftover lemon curd. They made delicious cookies together. The rest became history. There was some heroin involved as well, and that was where it all went badly wrong. But had they just stuck to making cookies, we would be listening to very different albums these days. But go on, back to the pizza peel. That's amazing. So you use the parchment paper that we use to make our punk rock cookies with underneath the pizza, but you don't leave it there for the whole cook. You yank it out like a tablecloth underneath table servings when you pull off a party trick?
No, about 2 minutes or so into the cook with a pair of tongs, so I'm not touching a 550-degree stone with my hand like a hardcore rocker would. You take a pair of tongs, slide the pizza peel underneath the pizza itself, in between now the pizza and the paper, and you're basically lifting the pizza off the paper. Take it out with the tongs, and it's now garbage. It's now for your recycle bin, etc. But now you're placing the pizza directly onto the stone. 2 minutes into its cook, so it's sealed a bit. The baking process has started. It's just a technique in terms of doing it. You can place a pizza directly onto the pizza stone, but on the peel, you're going to want to use like a semolina kind of grain, like a some sort of flour like that has a gritty kind of a texture to make it easy to slide the pizza dough off of it. That's a technique used in pizzerias all over the world. But I find as a homemaker, as a homemaker, you got to use and do what you got to do. So I use the parchment paper, and I find it a really good tool.
So if you were wondering if it's possible to make delicious pizzeria style pizza at home, Ray is here to tell you, yes, you can. You just need a ceramic pizza stone, which you got to heat at about 550 degrees for an hour before you put your pizza on it. And then just like that, you have authentic, almost pizzeria style pizza made at home.
Yes.
Ray,
absolutely.
Ray, you have come a long way since the days when we would heat up tofu hot dogs on radiators on tour.
There was a joy in that as well. the old toothpick through the tofu dog just to make it easier to pick up. And like their techniques and their techniques, and Sid Vicious knew all of them.
Do you remember, and we'll end after this, but do you remember doing like our very first van tour ever? And our drummer, God bless him, Mikey B, was determined to turn over a new leaf of health and wellness and fitness. And he got himself, we would run from the front of a 16 passenger tour van. We would have one of those things that you stuck into the cigarette lighter to turn it into an electric outlet. We would then put electric strip in that, and it would be plugged into like 4 or 5 different laptops on tour. And then one extension cord would run all the way to the back where Mikey B in the back lounge, as we so lovingly called it, had a blender going and he was making smoothies. That lasted for about 2 days before there was an interesting form of fungus growing in it. And we're like, you can't do that. Like you clean it or you lose it.
Yeah, that was not made for that kind of touring and that kind of way of living. It just did not work. But but you did what you could do, and I mean he was between Denny's at the time. He was between off the road or side of the road cooking options. So he did what he could do. But yeah, that was pretty disgusting.
I think it's amazing that nowadays, most of the time that we're talking, when we're not talking about music and talking about baseball, what we're talking about mostly is different cooking techniques. And I guess this is part of why we wanted to include it on our show. These are actual conversations where, hey, what are you cooking this weekend? Well, this weekend I'm doing this. I figure I've got you. And Ray's in deep with it. He spent years in Rome learning how to really, really cook. And if I ever have a cooking question, I go to Ray, because I guarantee you, it was just like being on tour. If you had a question, Ray would find you the answer. And if he didn't know the answer, he would get it for you. But same with cooking nowadays. But I find it so incredible that the bulk of our conversations are about cooking and cooking techniques, when our formative years were, like you said, toothpicks into a tofu dog over a radiator, or living on Denny's house salads.
Yeah, I find that of all the bands and artists that I've toured with over all these years, a common topic for everybody tends to be they all have a deep fascination with cooking and being able to do it. And I personally think it has a lot to do with the fact that we're gone and live on the road eating takeout for so long that there's a deep, like, man, if I can get home and just make myself a grilled cheese sandwich at home, I feel like I'm home. I feel like it's it's a different mindset. So that's that's where a lot of people's on the road fascinations came with cooking, etc.
On the road, it didn't matter. Like, there's high times and low times and all the times in between when you're in a band. And a lot of it was being wined and dined at some of the greatest restaurants on the face of the planet when you arrive to New York or LA, and some record label weasel has corporate checkbooks open and you're going for a really great meal. And then the rest of the time you're crossing the country, like we said, living on Denny's house salads. But those times where you are, it doesn't matter if you're eating the most incredible restaurant meal ever, or if you're just in some diner, or if you're just in if you decide to splurge that night and you're like, I remember on the road, it was just like, oh man, we get to stay at a Hampton Inn and eat Cracker Barrel. This is fantastic. Like, this is really living. We sold some extra T-shirts tonight. We're eating good. So, yeah. But so it doesn't matter if you're eating at the best restaurant in the world with all the Michelin stars, or if you're eating in the middle of nowhere. When you get a break in that action and someone says, hey, you want to come over to I've got a friend in this city and their mom or their wife or they are going to cook us a home cooked meal. Like, stop. Everything stops and you go to do that. And which is probably why, you're right, so many people that have spent a lot of their life on the road have become very enthusiastic about cooking later. By the way, I'm looking at your video now, Il Forno con Amico. Ray, in case you hadn't seen it yet, has a cooking channel on YouTube. Search Raymond Amico on YouTube, or I'm guessing there's not too many Il Forno con Amicos on YouTube either. But there's
I hope not.
Yeah. What were the chances? but I'm sitting here looking at you in your very spiffy kitchen with your expensive mixer and your those aren't granite countertops. I think those are marble. Are those marble countertops?
Those are quartz to be accurate, because quartz is a cheaper material than granite is. And when you're refurbing your house, if you are needing to do all your countertops, etc., like that, you'll find that the quartz equivalent will save you quite a bit of money on your total renovation budget. So yeah, no, those are quartz, and they're awesome. They look gorgeous.
I'm looking at the video now, and it does look very fancy. Like I said, we have come an awfully long way. Well, you have anyway.
I tried, it was literally just my attempt at helping anybody that I possibly could understand how to make dough from scratch, how to handle the dough like the way it should be handled in a pizzeria. And just like I love the fact of being able to help people with their abilities or develop their abilities of cooking, because it's not rocket surgery in terms of the types of ingredients, etc., like that. And people have all their favorites, etc., like that. Cooking is a free form. It's free form jazz. Baking is science. Baking is total science, and it needs to be that way, because if you're going to put something from the Earth and fly it to Mars, and you want it to accurately land there and do things, that's got to be science. To me, baking is that level. Cooking is a passionate, diverse. I'm going to throw this at that, and I particularly like this over that. It's way more of a free form. You know what I've really enjoyed about cooking? Like, I straight up could not cook for the longest time, and I can kind of cook something. Yeah. I never told you this. We were off the road for quite some time, and we were no longer working together when this happened to me. Did I ever tell you I set a cup of tea on fire? No. So I grew up in England drinking tea. This is kind of what this takes some skills, and this gives you an idea of my level of cooking ability before COVID hit. You burned water. Yeah, I set a cup of tea on fire. So I grew up in England. I enjoy drinking tea. So I figured I'd make myself a cup of tea, but did not have a kettle in the place where I was living. So I do what you always do. It's sort of the act of a Philistine, a bounder, and a cat. It's not how you make a proper cup of tea, but the ends justify the means. And I made my cup of tea in the microwave. And I about a minute into heating up my tea, I noticed there's flames coming out of the cup. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I saw I'd forgotten to put the water in, and the tea bag went up in a puff. So panicked, I dealt with the burning tea bag and started again making another cup of tea, remembering to add the water this time. I turn around, and my freaking trash can's on fire because I didn't make sure the tea bag was out before. So yeah, not only did I burn water, but I actually set the home on fire making a cup of tea. So I had no cooking ability until COVID kicked in, and I was like, I guess I'm going to give this a go. I got nothing else to do this afternoon. But one thing I've really found is that cooking has this incredible ability to bring people together. First time I cooked something, I was like, look, I made something and I didn't set it on fire. Here it is, internet, have a look. And immediately it was people from all sorts of backgrounds with all sorts of beliefs going, how long, what temperature, what sort of dry rub did you use for this barbecue? Did you go wood? Did you go hickory or cherry wood with that? You should try this. And I found that, there's a lot of things that make us different and a lot of things that drive us apart, but food is something that brings us together. And well, I think that's an important thing, and I think it's a great way of sharing and building up a new circle of friends and associates in a way that is not going to cause argument. So it's a beautiful thing, and I think part of why we decided to include Ray's experience of replicating a pizzeria on the show. Pizzeria. Well, when I moved to Italy, my next door neighbor, who doesn't speak a word of English, but grew up a huge New York punk rock fan. So Ramones and New York Dolls, etc., like that. When I moved next door, he was just like, oh my God, there's this New Yorker from back in the day living next door to me. And his fascination, with the punk rock music of New York and everything like that was a real, it really bound us together, and it was a real good meeting point. But he literally told me, in Italian, he doesn't speak a word of English, but he literally told me, he goes, do you think you live in Rome? And I told him, I was like, yeah, this is my apartment. I live here. He says, no. You don't live in Rome unless you can cook like a Roman for Romans. And so he taught me 4 like quintessential Roman dishes that I had to know, and he basically taught me them, and it was great, and I really appreciated it. I learned it, and then I went out on tour. I was gone for a couple of months, and I came home to my apartment and literally landed, and he told me, "Hey, great, you're home. You're cooking for 12 Italians tomorrow, and you have to nail it." And my feet were thrown on the fire, and it was like, represent. You have to prove that you have to prove that you live here. You have to prove that you're not just passing through or pretending to live here.
Wow, yeah. That's sort of like the culinary version of locals only.
Yeah. It was awesome. It was very intense, and it forced me to step up my game. And I mean, in Italian cooking, it's so provincial. It's so there's so much differential between just regions of Italy. The Italians are not Italians. They are, say, Romans first, and then Italians, or Milanese and Italians,
or Sicilian,
or Sicilian, or Calabrese, or like they are literally like from their region first, then Italians. And so the cooking styles, etc., like that, all of those regional pieces come way more into play, dialect wise and cooking wise.
Well, follow us for more recipes.
Yeah, we got tons.
I dealt with a burning tea bag. Sounds like an entirely different problem the tour manager has to contend with on the road.
Get the business manager on the phone for me.